Good morning, Nature Niños families. My name is Sally Anderson, and you are tuning in here to the Nurturing with Nature Parenting Series, Module 2. I am certain that more people will be jumping on, but we're going to just kind of get started because that's what we need to do. This particular module is called Garden Goodness, Growing with the Young Child in Mind. Let's see, Dee, you might have to change the slides for me. Technology people, we're little delay. So this particular parenting series is a collaboration between the City of Albuquerque Parks and Recreation and Open Spaces, as well as Nature Niños. The CABQ, I, Sally Anderson, was actually leading a family nature club once a month with some colleagues through my contract work with the City of Albuquerque until COVID-19 came along. I also work part-time for Nature Niños, which is a program of the New Mexico Wildlife Federation. So we kind of put our hats together, if you will, our heads together, and we came up with this series that we're hoping will bring in some families who are new to, getting their nature on, and or who have been doing it for quite a while and can help contribute as we bring new families into the fold. Go ahead, Misty. Maybe I'll put my thumb up each time I'm ready for you to change, if that's okay. So, oh gosh, I hope I didn't send you, I hope this is the updated version because I got rid of this slide this morning, Dee, but I guess it's the version we're going with. This just kind of explains the actual series, and I just sort of said something about it a moment ago. We're really trying to aim this towards parents with young children, either who have just had their young children and maybe they were nature lovers to start with, and they're now sort of exploring what that looks like with their little ones, or parents who are brand new to all of this. And we at Nature Niños really are about getting kids out, getting families out. We believe in sort of a slow childhood, giving children lots of time to play and explore, all of that good kind of stuff that in some ways is thought of as old-fashioned these days. This is just some information about these meetings. We would love if you would type in your name and your email now so that we can just be sure who's here. We do have some evaluations that will occur afterwards. We encourage you to use the chat and the raise hand functions during these modules. We'd really love if you could join us. Today perhaps is not the day, but consider carving out some time for yourself, as well as being outside if at all possible when you tune in with your kids playing in the background. We will be posting information, resources, follow-up activities related to each module on our Facebook page after the fact. Thanks everybody for your emails coming through. As an FYI, if you join us later on down the line for one of the other modules, all of the login information stays the same. That's not going to change. Whenever possible, we are using place-based sharings for each module. I am very, 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 very committed to that idea of doing that as we go through these modules. So I will tell you all of the images and the pictures of children you see today in this presentation are all pictures primarily of, well, Southwestern, because Dee, who I will introduce in a minute, is my colleague and friend from Arizona. So we could say it's a little southwestern look at the children between our two states. And we encourage you to join our Nature Niños Rewilding Childhood Revolution. That's the way we're thinking about this. We want a revolution. So today is the 24th, Garden Goodness, Growing with the Young Child in Mind. Our next one comes up in June, mid-June, and that one is going to be all about play and understanding the developmental stages of play and how you could support really good, developmentally appropriate, soulful play with young children. Following that, we will have one that is looking at your own backyards and designing on a dime. We've got a special guest that's going to come that day who is very, very talented, and she has a side business where this is what she does for parks and open spaces and schools and preschools and even privately. So she's going to walk us through some really simple things that you can do so that your children have the opportunity to just adventure in their own backyards. Then we'll move on to hiking and exploring, and we'll have some stories from, just getting them out into the forest and maybe finding a little place to sit. And it doesn't have to be the forest, it could be other places. All the way to that day, hopefully we'll have another special guest, or at least someone who is providing us a video look at what she does with her children since a very young age, taking them out backpacking and kind of walking us through what that looks like. And then the final day is really kind of talking about, how we together can kind of grow this movement. And if all goes well, we'll also share some community stories and what have you. Hopefully you can hear me well, and this is coming through okay. I do think I sent Miss D the not most updated version, so I'm bummed about that because I put in a few extra pictures last minute, particularly to you, Miss D, but we'll see. It is what it is. So this is a little bit about me. While Dee and I are introducing ourselves, this is one of the things that is not in this latest version. I encourage you to just type into the chat box if you have an early memory around gardening, this subject, or maybe recall like a grandparent's garden. Maybe as a school child, you went to the pumpkin patch every year and you thought that was really cool. I'm just encouraging you, inviting you, if you would like to just share a sweet memory related to the topic, you can go ahead and do that now, and we'll see them pop up in the chat box as we continue. So a little bit about me. Many of you on the call already know me, but I'm a 30-year education veteran. I have a master's, almost 2 master's degrees in education, particularly both our early childhood, school administration, as well as special education, specifically to children who are deaf and hard of hearing. That's what I did for about 30 years consistently until recently. I am a certified forest and nature schools practitioner from Forest Schools Canada. That was a year-long program. I am also something called a Tinker Garden leader and a Shinrin-yoku forest therapy guide, and I'm wilderness first aid trained. So that's what kind of brings me into this nature-specific work. I worked at the School for the Deaf in Santa Fe for a number of years. And started the first forest school program there in, we think, the world for children who are deaf. I'm loving watching your comments come through. Thank you. I also founded something called Soul Forest School in the East Mountains. And one of our mamas, Miss D, is with us today. She's one of our soul mamas. And then Miss Bree, if you see Miss Bree, you go ahead and wave, Bree. Bree's our lead teacher with Soul Forest School, but she is a gardening diva, I do some part-time work with Prescott College, which is how I got to meet the amazing Dee, who we'll introduce in a minute. And I also do some part-time work with the city of Albuquerque, as well as Nature Niños. I am the early childhood coordinator for the new Nature Niños program of the New Mexico School for the Deaf. I am first and foremost a nature lover and a nature mama. I just have one boy named Odin. He will be 17 in June, but he has been nature-fied since birth, really. It's a little hard these days to drag him away from the screen. This is the reality we live in. But once he does get outside, he still really loves it. And I would say that I am a guardian of childhood. I am as motivated about connecting children to nature as I am to really protecting the rights of young children to roam freely and have a childhood that everybody, I believe, is entitled to. So now introducing my great and wonderful friend and special guest today, Diona. I'm going to let her sort of talk for herself. She's fabulous, and I'm so excited to be able to do this with her. Go, Dee.
All right. My name is Diona Williams, and I live in Southern Arizona. I live in a small town called Sierra Vista, and I've been in early childhood for about almost 20 years. My education background, my undergrad, I studied early childhood studies, and I went back to school, got a master's in organizational management, and then I decided to go back one more time to specialize in early childhood special education. I too met Sally through Prescott, through Summer Institute. I just started, I would say, professionally doing this work as far as early childhood environmental education about almost 3.5 years ago. And I started my own program here in town called Outback Learning, LLC, and I work full-time at Tohono O'odham Community College as an early childhood education professor. I too am a cautious nature lover, and I would say also, yes, I'm a nature mama as well. My daughter is 11, and she was cautiously into nature when she was little too. Both of us, I would say, we've grown. Well, she's grown. I feel like she's come a long way when it comes to doing things outdoors. But we both started in the garden space. And so once we decided to finally settle down, my husband was prior Army. He was medically retired. And once we purchased our house, I said, we got to have a garden, because that's what I remember growing up with my grandparents. They always had gardens or plants or something. So that's how I have connected with nature, is through gardening. And I too am a guardian of childhood as well. So that's a little bit about myself. Nice to meet you all.
Yay. And thank you for sharing those memories. I did see them, and Dee saw them. So let's keep on going. I'm going to get over the fact that this was not my final version of the presentation. What we are going to have to do, Dee, is, because this one I do not think has Ollie's beautiful little movie in it. I do have that on my desktop. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. And hopefully we are going to figure this out. I'm sorry, guys. I live way down a canyon in the mountains east of Albuquerque, and my connection was really, really slow as Dee and I were checking in. So we very last minute decided to switch around and have her run the slides. But now we are using, hopefully, can you see this? Let's see. Oops. We might have to do a kerfuffle here in a minute if it's not going to work and switch back around. Technology, right? It's kind of tricky. So let me see if I can go into the share screen. only one participant can share at a time. So Dee, could you please stop your share on your end? Just press the red thing at the top that says stop share.
We're good.
And I would like, you did it? Okay, so I would like to introduce, Ollie's listening. I sent a little thing out through our Nature Niños grapevine asking if anybody wanted to share pictures or something. I got lots and lots and lots from all kinds of people. And this is a little movie that Ollie sent. There's Ollie and Law and Orion. Hi. And Ollie's got 3-year-old twins. And I'm so glad they're here. They live down in the wilderness, down in the Gila wilderness. So, oh, crikey. It's not showing up, Dee. So, you stopped sharing, right? Okay, this is what I'm going to do. I really apologize, guys, for this, but we are going to see. We can always switch back if we have to. I'm going to pull this up and go back to my own sharing here. Just goes to show too, one has to listen to their intuition, because I knew it was slow, but I was also kind of like, maybe we just go ahead anyway. I am so confused about what is going on. Dee, why don't you tell us about, why don't you go down the wormhole for a minute while I play with this and tell us a little bit more about Outback and what's going on in your garden.
Okay, so much like everyone else in the world, Outback is on hiatus. I would say probably 2 days ago, I was definitely saying at least till January, but I have reached out to other nature-based and forest school programs, to other owners that are in the same situation, and just trying to understand, like, what are they doing? Like, how are you keeping your staff safe? How are you keeping the children safe? So I feel a little bit more encouraged to maybe do a 1 day a week type of option for families and kids. I say the fall because my mind is always thinking of semesters, but like from August till maybe October. So that's what's going on with Outback, but Outback is also shifting gears and doing some other unique things. My daughter did a lot of research on chickens, and so this past week we purchased 4 chickens. Anyone that knows me, they know that I have a very irrational fear of birds. Like, it's really irrational. It makes no sense. So the running joke is like, have I held a chicken? I'm like, I'm too chicken to do it. But I plan to hold a chicken, and I plan to document all of these fun things that are happening with the chickens. And my husband grew up in Leesville, Louisiana, so he's I'm air quoting the country one of the group, and so he's referring to my daughter and I as the city slickers. So I'm like, I've named the chickens the city chicks because they are being raised by 2 city girls that we're really trying to figure this out. But I'm excited because watching her do all this research, like I said, she's 11. And when I started really getting into gardening, it was about 5 years ago. She was about 5, 6, give or take. And I remember she was just terrified to do everything. And so to see her like picking up these chickens and clearing out their cages, I'm like, yes, I did something right. It really excites me because I've learned through her lens that she doesn't mind nature as long as she has something to do. And so gardening for her, it's gardening for her, just being outdoors. I think sometimes even as a parent, you're thinking like, well, just go outside to play. But for her, like as long as she has a task to do, then she'll engage with anything outside. But now she's getting to a point where she's just exploring on her own. Um, and about 2 weeks ago, we discovered that we have in our backyard, we have 5 trees. One of them is a peach tree, but we figured out 2 weeks ago that one of our trees is a white mulberry tree. So we have harvested, I think, 5 cups of mulberries, which is another exciting thing I would say for Outback Learning, because had I had students, we would have been eating mulberries for the past couple of weeks because there are just thousands of mulberries growing on this tree. So um, Sally, are you
Awesome.
ready to wrap up?
Can you see the screen now of this beautiful little young Lauren of Miss Breeze when she was little? This was the slide to prompt you to have a memory. So hopefully we will be able to go ahead with these little pictures nonetheless. Okay, we went through me, we went through D. Then here is little Orion and Law. Obviously, these two little ones started really young, and here's the beautiful movie. I hope it comes through well. We are going to figure out how to get it on the Nature Niños website if it doesn't work. So fingers crossed, everybody. Give us some Zoom magic, please. Here we go.
What What's your favorite vegetable? Is the green beans. And what is the salad? You on how to garden with them. My first tip is to dive in. So for us, that meant this year, for the first time, the boys got to pick their own vegetables that they wanted to garden. They wanted to plant, so they each had their own garden bed in their Georgia. My second tip is to make routine out of it. So for us, our boys get out every single morning and they know they have to water before it gets too hot. They each have a garden bed. This salad is a lunch mix. That's what they both chose, and they're very proud of that. I think it's really important to instill that type of responsibility young. And for us, we've been able to make it fun because kids love water. They love dirt. So gardening is just a perfect combination of that. And my third tip is to make it a family affair. So for us, my
Wow, pretty cool, huh? Pretty awesome. I don't know, Ollie, if you want to unmic yourself and tell us anything more. I sort of feel like you just gave the whole presentation just in that little movie. Dee and I are done. The work is over.
I'm not sure if everyone else
Did you
could.
want to add anything?
My side, it was super choppy, so I couldn't hear anything.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All good.
Yes, my internet connection is really, really slow. So obviously those two little cuties shared their favorite parts about gardening and their favorite things to harvest, green beans and lettuce mix. And Mom gave us some really great tips about, you know, giving them their own space. They got to choose their own garden box this year, each of them. They water together. It's a family affair. And, you know, it teaches really wonderful responsibility and stewardship from a really early age. Did I miss anything, Ollie?
Nope, that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much for sending it in. We'll make sure we get it up on the webpage where people can, you know, enjoy it without really crappy speed and technology. Is everybody able to hear me though, even if I'm a bit delayed? Is it okay? Give me a thumbs up. Okay. So Dee and I are going to kind of switch back and forth as we go through the rest of this little presentation. I took this picture the other day because as I started to put together this module, I went and had a cup of tea, and this was the tea bag that popped up. So in addition to Ollie's beautiful little film, I kind of thought this proverb of plant kindness and gather love was pretty much, in my way of thinking, what gardening does. I mean, we're really planting kindness and we're gathering love when we do these things. You know, kindness and love for our bodies, kindness and love for the people that we are feeding. And I like to believe too that just that stewardship piece, you know, starting really with the most simple of cherry tomatoes or something like this. We're planting kindness and we're gathering love. So what we've got here is, and I don't, where do I put you guys? I want you to be able to see. This is from a document that we'll make sure that you get a copy of. It's basically 7 gardening tips or benefits of gardening with young children. I arranged them in terms of days because if you're anything like me right now, sometimes you forget what day it is. So I thought we would just go ahead and talk about these benefits and move through the week. Sharing as we go. And again, these beautiful pictures are from my friends and colleagues who sent them in. This is a little Sierra that when she was very small, a dear friend of mine's, Marissa, her daughter in the kale forest. So Monday, gardening benefit number 1, it encourages littles to eat better. There's Mr. Law and Orion again. Dee, go ahead and put your finger up when you're ready for me to switch again once you've seen the image.
I just wanted to add something to the images. I know we didn't talk about this beforehand, but when I started Outback and started gardening with the kids, it was really interesting because a lot of the parents would express like, I have a picky eater, they don't like to try anything, they're not interested, but it was so different when the kids, I had one student in particular that would basically eat pizza. That's what Mom said. But this student watching other kiddos harvest, like strawberries and tomatoes, this little guy was willing to try things that he had never tried before. And so it's a little, I feel like it's a testimonial because Mom would then express like, I had to buy strawberries because he likes strawberries. I didn't know that he liked strawberries, all because I had a couple of strawberry plants growing in the garden. Another favorite that the kids, I don't call them kids, I call them Outbackers. So the Outbackers loved eating kale. right out of the garden. Like literally, that's pretty much how I never had to prune them back because they would just eat them right out of the garden. When they tried to eat lettuce, they did not care for lettuce so much. They would harvest tomatoes all the time, but they did not like the taste of tomatoes. They had already figured that out with their families. But they were willing to make salsa. So I had a really a jalapeno plant that just kept thriving and thriving. So we made salsa during one of our sessions last semester. I just wanted to add that.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. And I think all of us by thumbs up could probably attest to the fact that there's a lot more motivation when we're growing foods for little ones to want to eat them and be more healthy. I certainly know when I was gardening, when I was still at the Albuquerque preschool for the New Mexico School for the Deaf, same thing. We followed a curriculum called Early Sprouts. You guys might want to check it out. It's totally geared towards little ones. It comes with recipes, all kinds of stuff, and it's the brainchild of a pediatric nutritionist, as well as an early childhood professor. And there's a lot of evidence that, you know, in our culture, what we tend to do is we will introduce a food once or twice to a baby or a young child. You know, imagine feeding them mushed up peas, for instance, and they'll like spit out the peas. And we do that once or twice and we kind of go, oh, they don't like peas. Well, the research actually shows that there needs to be usually at least 5, 6, sometimes 7 tries of something for a child to really truly be like that they don't like it. It could be textural. It could be, you know, the way it's being introduced. It could be that it's just new and there's a little bit of fear around that. So I appreciate that, Dee. I think gardening really increases the chance that a child will try something, but we also have to, in a neutral way, keep offering it to them in order for them to want to try. So we're on Tuesday now. It provides engaging and moderate exercise. And this little one popping up, Dee can tell you about this little cutie.
So this picture, again, is about 5 years old. I'm saying this because even though she has on a mask, her and I are both asthmatic. And if you know anything about the Southwest, it gets really dusty during the time in which we need to sow seeds into the ground. So usually my husband is always like I feel like overreactive and not letting us do the hard work. But in this particular case, she is tilling the ground. Obviously, most of the ground appears to be pretty tilled already, but I wanted her to have a chance to do it herself too. And she was actually asking, I want to try? And so she tried it as well. And as you know, because we're all in the Southwest, like the ground can get really, really hard. And I wish that this part of the garden looked like this still. It took a lot of hard work, a lot of labor, a lot of love. But I've also learned with gardening, like it's okay to have raised beds when you're residing in the desert because the ground can just be too rocky, too dry. But anyhow, as far as exercise, this was a great way for her to exercise and not even realize that she was exercising. It just gave her a purpose in the garden.
Do you want to talk about this next one too?
Sure. So benefits to gardening on Wednesday, it builds a sense of confidence. I would definitely say I've seen this with my daughter. I just over and over again from when she was 6 years old, 5, 6 years old till now. She has no problems repotting plants, planting seeds, watering. She can do all of this stuff on her own, and she's 11. And to me, I think about when she was younger, I'm like, is she really like getting this? But watching her now in this particular gardening season, she can either pot them into pots or into the ground. She knows how to harvest. She knows where to find the materials on what to do. And I definitely think it has helped build more confidence in her, and not just in outdoor activities, but just in other activities of her life, where she may not necessarily feel confident in, I'm just trying to think of a subject like in math or something, but because she's able to just do so many things independently without having necessarily me or my husband looking over her, she's just able to do more things on her own, which ultimately that's what I want, is for her to have the independence.
This is a little Lauren, Bree's daughter, when she was little,
Aw.
working those scissors. So thinking about the fourth, if I'm right, Thursday, the fourth benefit, it's develop STEM and analytical abilities. Really important. So we are not at all just playing in the dirt, so to speak. And I'm being very conscious these days of my word choice, and I'm trying not to say dirt, because if you think about it, dirt just doesn't do justice to, you know, this wonderful work that we're doing. Soil. We're not just playing in the soil. This is little Bennett, Misty's guy from Forest School. Look at that little face. Okay, Miss D.
Okay. So Friday, it relieves stress. I definitely feel like even when you're not gardening, so one of our traditions that we have found that we're doing, especially during this present time in our lives, is Sundays we tend to hang out in the garden. It's almost like a reward for all the hard work we've done during the week, whether it's just watering the garden, how ironic, perfect slide, or just cleaning up the yard the day before. And on Sundays, we'll barbecue, we'll eat dinner outside. Not that we can't do that on any other day out of the week, but it just seems like such a relaxing day that we just feel so, I don't know, we just feel like relaxed. And we're just enjoying the space. And I think it's really important that when you put in so much time and effort into your garden, that you take the time to enjoy the garden. So I also find on these days, like my daughter and I tend to be a little bit more creative and thinking about like, oh, well, what else could we do? So did you want me to do this one too?
Awesome. Go ahead.
On Saturday, it improves focus and memory. I definitely think anytime you're doing any kind of gardening, it does increase a lot of focus. Trying to think of an example. I'll say whenever with the kids with Outback, when we were harvesting the cabbage, there was a lot of steps in harvesting the cabbage, whether it was cutting it, pulling back the leaves, using the extra leaves for compost, how to clean the cabbage, and then what we could make with the cabbage. It required a lot of focus, I felt, for them. And my kiddos, or my Outbackers, are 3, 4, and 5. And even the 3-year-olds were engaged with the activity, but I think it's because they were also doing the activity themselves. So they were able to focus. And then whenever we would have story time and we were talking about compost, or we were just talking about gardening in general, they have this memory of like, do you remember when we were harvesting the cabbage, Misty? And then they could just go through all the steps, which I found fascinating too, because to me, it showed that it was something meaningful for them. Even if they don't like the taste of cabbage, they just enjoyed that process to the point where they actually remembered it. So.
Absolutely. So final one, and really this is 7 benefits. I think that easily there are 7 more and 7 more after that, but it positively improves mood and psychological well-being. You've noticed that with Liasia, right, Dee?
Absolutely. And this picture, this was our first year harvesting from our peach tree. And I just remember how excited she was to harvest from it, all the way down to getting chickens this past week. You would have thought I said Santa was coming, because she was like, I don't think I can sleep tonight. I'm like, it's okay. We have to call Tractor Supply to make sure the chickens are there. But thankfully she did go to sleep, but it did improve her mood. And I think it was just something that, because we didn't have to convince her of the idea. It was something that she had thought of on her own and had really invested her time and energy towards it. So having it come to fruition, I'm not worried about, because sometimes with kids, like, they'll get excited about things and you're like, okay, are they really going to keep up with this? I'm not too worried about it, because this is what she's wanted to do, you know? So that's exciting.
So there's a lot more going on than just digging in that soil when we garden with little ones. We've got science skills happening, such as classification, learning about the weather, insects, soil, plant life cycles. We've got math skills, counting, measuring, weighing. We've got language skills, describing and comparing color, taste, and texture. Fine motor skills, which is the small muscles, mixing, spreading, and chopping. Also, it's not on the list, but there would be large motor skills like Liasia, tilling the soil there, or using a big old shovel, or maybe a rake. Cognitive skills such as curiosity, cause and effect, and problem solving. D, the next two slides are what's appropriate for ages. Why don't you go through those?
Okay.
Can you
I have to move
see?
you guys over. Okay, so for 2-year-olds, pushing child-size wheelbarrows, watering plants with help from a teacher or parent, pushing large seeds such as beans and peas into the soil, observing insects and ripening the produce, ripening
produce,
like,
the produce that's ripening, the fruits and veggies that are ripening.
Yes. For 3-year-olds, mixing soil to prepare garden beds, planting large seeds and seedlings, filling up water cans, which this is very true. I have experience with this one. I would have a kid or an outbacker come, and that was just the one thing he wanted to do. Granted, he was 2, almost 3. He just wanted to fill up the water cans and water everything. So watering plants, pulling weeds, observing plant growth, comparing leaf shapes, and describing appearance of fruits and vegetables. Keep going.
I switched it. It should pop up in a moment here.
Shoveling compost and mulch. Actually, I have a really good book that I read to the kids this year. It's called Compost Stew. I don't have the name of the author offhand, but maybe, Sally, we can figure out how to share that with parents. Raking soil to prepare garden beds, planting small seeds and seedlings, harvesting ripe produce, training and weaving vines onto a trellis or fence, collecting seeds and filling up water cans, watering plants, pulling weeds, identifying garden insects, weighing produce, comparing shapes and sizes of produce and observing insects and birds, and drawing garden scenes or items. I have a quick story of, if it's okay for me to share, Sally, can I share?
Go ahead, sure.
So one of
Yes,
the
please.
We had a native milkweed plant here in Outback, and it was really exciting because, as you know, milkweed will attract monarch butterflies, and we actually had a monarch drop 2 eggs off, and it was really fascinating because the kids were able to really see the process of the egg to the caterpillar to the chrysalis to the butterfly. And we were able to document it, and they were able to just draw whatever they saw in their nature journal books that they had. and that was something that I didn't necessarily plan for, but it was just another way that they were connecting with nature in a different way, other than us planting things in the ground. It was just a fun, exciting activity for them.
And I think that's true. I think whenever we look at connecting young children to nature, it's one of those deals of one thing leads to another. And it's why Peter Gray, who's a famous psychologist and a huge inspiration for me, he talks about something called Mother Nature's pedagogy, that children are really meant to learn through nature. And he is very involved in sort of the idea of unschooling, things like that. That's, people have different opinions about that. That's a different subject for a different day. But the reason why he came to mind is because it's that idea that we as a culture sometimes in a silly way assume that unless we as the adults are in charge and we have the curriculum and we have the materials and we are sort of pouring that information into the child, that's the only way they'll learn. And it couldn't be further from the truth. It's really, if we are willing to let go of our control and be in a place of discomfort sometimes, because we don't know if the monarch butterfly is going to show up. But guess what? Something else will show up. So, really sort of kind of going, okay, I'm going to just sort of wait for this inspiration and this wonder and this opportunity and this curiosity to pop up, and then following that little path with the child, in my opinion, is much more powerful for their learning and their growth than in any other way. This is just a 101, and I know all the folks on the call right now are already actively gardening, but this would be a cute little thing to perhaps even have sort of laminated for children for them to kind of see the little steps. That's another way that it could be used. We've got next just a few gardening activity ideas. Again, this series, we are hoping to pull in some new parents. I do think when we repost the video, people do watch it and they kind of get it then. This is a really cool idea. Hopefully you could see the screen, but kitchen scrap gardening. There are a multitude of vegetables that could be regrown, and Nature Niños, if you are sort of watching our space on our Facebook page, we sort of in May, I want to say, I think it was in May, maybe June, there was a series of a few classes specifically on kitchen scrap gardening, which are still up on our page, so you could go back in and check that out if you're interested. These are just some examples of a multitude of different vegetables and things that can be grown again from scraps. Can everybody see that picture so I can change? Yeah? Okay, and then Dee, do you want to talk about this idea a little bit?
So
Come on, slide.
it was transitioning. So another really good idea is growing seeds from eggshells or from egg cartons. I personally would save the eggshells for composting. So I would probably lean towards doing the egg carton growing of seed starters. When I first started doing gardening 5 years ago, naively would not have known to do this. But now I would say, instead of buying any kind of seed pods that you see at like your local stores, this would be the way to go, because you probably already have these resources at home. I feel like I'm going to speak for like the old new gardener that I was. You naively do things because you don't know, but as you continue to garden, you realize like you have so many other resources already around you. So just try to, whatever you're trying to do, just be resourceful. I've even grown seeds out of cans. With Outback, I don't know if it's a combination of the fact that my town is no longer recycling or decided that they weren't going to recycle anymore. So I became the guardian of recycling. I just started saving everything. and started growing everything out of everything. So milk cartons, cans, paper cartons, egg cartons. I would just grow whatever I could just to see like if there was a difference, if it made it better, worse. And seeds will grow regardless, you know, as long as they have a good system to just the irrigation so the water can come out and all that other stuff, you'll be fine. Don't be afraid to grow anything in anything.
Right. This little girl, her name is Athena, and she is the daughter of a family that I worked with at the School for the Deaf. And Fernando, who was one of my educational assistants, he really, through our school gardening, it really changed the way he was eating, quite literally. And now he's gardening with his littles. And I love this little picture because she's so intently looking at those little sprouts standing on her tippy toes. And the picture of the watering and the raking is this same family. And I really appreciate their pictures too, because they are very bare bones, like they're using the scraps they've got around. They don't have the income really to build anything fancy, and yet they're getting it done. So, you know, super important. So another good starting point for families who are really getting going is the used tire gardening. I know there's some evidence or maybe a belief out there that it's not a good idea because of the rubber in the tires. But again, keeping in mind what might be around and what might be available to families, I think growing something is going to be better than growing nothing. And this is a good way for, you know, some people to go. This is Sarah Candelaria's little backyard garden. She's our youth director for Nature Niños. And that's her little gal Ryan in the way back. And they have, gosh, they've got a cow now that they milk. They've got goats, they've got chickens, and this is all urban backyard here in Albuquerque. They are quite the example of the homestead going on right in the middle of town. I'll just talk about this quick, Dee. We're going to send out some resources after the fact. Like I said, this is a really cute little PDF that I found that you can just print and have your children cut. Ollie, this might be something cute for you and your twins, even Misty, where you can just kind of track what's going on in the garden. And then this is a lovely picture. I don't know, Bree, if you want to tell us what Lauren's doing here. I think the picture speaks volumes. But why don't you tell us the story behind this, because it just looks really juicy and good.
Sure. I know it's kind of confusing what's going on there. So right behind her is our vegetable garden, but inside, so you can't see it in the picture. But what she decided to do is something that we spend a lot of time doing when we go to the vegetable garden. We go out there at least once a day just to look around and see what's going on. And something that my daughter's really interested in is all the bugs, and especially the pollinators that we find in our vegetable garden. So she was curious about why different pollinators are visiting the mint versus the tomatoes versus any other flowering plant that's in the vegetable garden. So she decided that she wanted to do science. And so this was her idea. And I helped her to pick other flowers besides my tomato flowers from the garden because those are way too precious. But we set them up in the cups, and she's observing what kind of pollinators might come and visit those cut flowers as an extension to what we were already noticing in the vegetable garden. Yeah, it was cool. I will also give a dose of reality that she sat there for about 2 or 3 minutes. But still, it was an opportunity and I snapped that picture just in time. But, you know, it was the start of those types of observational skills and translating that to STEM.
And, you know, I wouldn't even feel the need to give that caveat, Bree, because we know with young children, they you know, they're hummingbirds. They flit about here, there, and everywhere. All of that information is obviously going in, and I think this picture is just beautiful. And I'm so glad I asked, because I wouldn't have known from this picture that it was the pollinators that was going on. And first of all, obviously she must have a mama who's a botanist. Just saying. But second of all, how stinking cool is that when we think about those observation skills that she was noticing, minutia like that, like what pollinators, what insects were visiting what plants. That's mind-boggling. So this is just such a gift of really anchoring children in place and developing those observation and patience skills. And, let's be radical in this day and age, because we're living in a time and place now. Obviously, things have really slowed down recently, and I think that that's a blessing for our world and for our children. But generally speaking, the normal before, that was not the normal in our culture. It was all about running. So gardening is just a wonderful way of helping children slow down. So I'm going to let Bree talk to these 3 tips, because that's obviously her and Leasia. But what I will say first is when I was preparing for this little presentation, I sent out emails to people like Bree, friends and colleagues. We also put something on the Nature Niños site. That's how we found the wonderful Ollie. And one of the questions I asked people was, who are experienced gardeners with young children, I said, what are your tips? And I have put together a document with all of those tips from about 5 or 6 different people, as well as some of their, favorite, their surprises or their delights around gardening with children. But these 3 were the top tips of sort of what, several people mentioned. So go ahead, Dee, you tell us about that little picture there that I love. And then those 3 top tips.
So in looking at this picture, this is kind of funny, because I sent this picture to my family 5 years ago. And the first thing they said, they were like, you and my daughter, her name is Leasia, but we call her Lily. They were like, you guys look like, the picture reminded them of my grandma when she was in the garden. So for me, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so touching that there would even be a comparison. And the other thing I would say about this picture, I should take like an updated picture, because the garden does not look so dusty like this anymore. So we've done a lot of work to make it more green versus desert. So some key pieces or key tips, it's about the process and not the product / outcome. I can speak to this on so many different levels. If there's anything I've learned, there's a reason why you plant or you sow multiple seeds, because they may not come up. You may not have a reason why they're not growing. So it's important just to enjoy the process. And especially with kids, of course, they'll ask, well, how come the lettuce seeds aren't growing? So then you can wander into that question a little bit more, like, well, why do you think it's not growing? In our case, we discovered that the squirrel that's eating all the strawberries out front was eating the seeds in the back. So that's kind of fun and exciting to talk about too. Be sure you are having fun. Sometimes gardening can be hard, and it may not always be as fun, but what I've learned, especially with young kids or with just the outbackers, is that they may only have the attention span to do some sort of gardening activity for 2 or 3 minutes, depending on their age, but that's okay. I can still continue the activity and they can continue exploring the nature around them. But as long as they're having fun, that's the key. And then number 3, this is so funny, but it's so true. Get dirty with them. I just want to like pause to that statement, because again, one of the things that I tell people is that and Sally knows this, is I can relate to the kids that have like the sensory tactile. I am that person, but I still am willing to get dirty. I may be wearing garden gloves or wearing an apron, whatever I can do to feel safe in the space. But I still think that there's a way that kids can get dirty at their comfortability level. But I do think if you've got a kiddo that doesn't have tactile sensory issues like myself, then go with it, you know. My daughter is totally fine with making mud pies. I probably am happy to take pictures of the mud pies and maybe holding the plate that the mud pie is on. But at the end of the day, as long as she's having fun and getting dirty with it, then that's all that matters to me. As long as I know I'm not passing
And
down funny issues that I have, that's all that matters. So,
right. Well, Dee, one of the things I really appreciate about you is the fact that you recognize that that's, you know, that's your shtick, that's your comfort level, that's where you're at. And I think it's a really, really valuable opinion to be shared, because particularly when we, you know, today you and I are, and this series is a little bit more about talking through our mama lens, but we do this as our work. And people kind of come into this from a variety of different directions. And particularly when we're talking with teachers and we're trying to kind of have them, you know, sign on to this revolution, there are some people who are just like, no, you know, it is not their comfort level. It is not their thing. And we need to be sensitive around that. And then yet, pretty much everybody, I'm going to make a gross assumption here, but pretty much everybody on the call today is drawn to this. So, you know, it's a whole spectrum. I will say that we all know that it doesn't matter what, you know, walk of life you come from, what cultural background, what race, what creed, what religion, what, you know, whatever, if we were to trace our lineages back far enough, we were all people of the land. We were all people of the land. So I do think there are ways to kind of tap into folks who, you know, maybe get their nature in different ways. I think a lot about my mom, who at 82, she lives in South Carolina in this like just amazing, you know, in the middle of, really it's practically a forest. It's a developed community, shall we say. But when I go and visit, I'm just like, my head is up the whole time, just looking at the canopy of all the trees there. It's so beautiful. And she's always had an appreciation for nature, but like her thing that she does now is she is constantly repotting little plants in pots. She literally, my mom is from England originally, so there's a common verb called pottering. I'm pottering around. So she quite literally potters around every day and just sort of, you know, replants or plants new little flowers and things in her pots. And to some, it might be like, well, that's not really nature. But actually it is. She's getting her hands in the dirt. She's living, you know, she's dealing with living things. It's bringing her joy. There's so much research that even taking the example of patients in a hospital, that they recover far more quickly if they've got a view to a green space. And research is even beginning to show, even if it's a virtual green space, believe it or not, if it's not like the real thing. So we are wired this way. And I think it's just important to know how, you know, how we want to get our nature on. So I think it's really kind of your secret weapon, Dee, the fact that you do come to some of this with a little bit of like, you know, pushing your edge and a little bit of like just sort of hesitation, because that's going to really help the revolution of bringing more and more people on board, in my opinion. So there you have it, folks. I know, like Misty, for example, I know there's a few people who are just getting into this idea of gardening. Watch out, because pretty soon you're going to be like Lily here, who's one of Odin, my son's, Odin's good buddies from when they were very small. Lily is now 16 years old. It's going to move pretty quickly from kale to chickens, from cherry tomatoes to baby goats. Dee did not mention that those little chickens her daughter Lily just got, the worlds that we're living in so many Zoom calls and what have you. Dee and I are connected on a lot of calls with a lot of different projects we have going on and some shared work. And her husband, much like my husband, sometimes looks at our work when we're online like this and they think, oh, they're just socializing. Oh, mom is just talking to Sally again. Mom is just talking to Sarah again. Mom's just talking to her friend Ellen again. So apparently, Lily, when she got those chicks, I just want to tell you, I have a chick named after me in Dee's backyard. I don't know if you want to add to that, Dee, but I think it's fabulous. And then we'll move into questions.
It's quite hilarious because oftentimes before this whole thing has happened in the world, when they would call me at work, it's like, well, how come you can't take calls? Well, I work in a very social environment. And I'm already a very social person. So they just chalked it up to like, oh, she's just talking all the time, but not realizing like in those conversations, there is a lot of productive work that happens as well, as I hear them laughing in the background because they just think this is hilarious. But I still think it's funny, but it just made me realize like, oh yeah, I guess that's what they're hearing these days. These are the conversations that my 11-year-old is picking up on, and I guess wanted to pay homage to my friends that I work with in the nature world. So it's quite funny. We all needed a good laugh, so it was funny to share that with Sarah, Ellen, and Sally, and my friend Kimberly, that they had chickens named after them.
I think that's great. So I think what we'll do now for a few minutes is just take any questions, or if you guys have a tip or a story or a comment you want to share, let's do a quick round if folks are still here. I apologize for the kind of rough start, and I think that the next module I'm going to have to go into the office in Albuquerque because it seems to be very much on my end. But anybody who wants to say or jump in, I don't know, Dee, I'll just go through and unmute everybody.
Okay.
Whoever wants to speak. Whoever wants to share. Does anybody have a question? Maybe let's start there first. If anybody actually has a question.
So I have a comment.
Misty.
Okay,
go ahead, Bree.
Oh, sorry. So something that something for us to share with other families, depending on what community that you're in, it might feel that established community gardens may not be super welcoming to very young children, but that depends. But you should look for places in the community that have gardens for the community that are for young children. Like we're really lucky in Albuquerque to have the Kiwanis Learning Garden that's by the New Mexico Museum of Natural History. And it's extremely welcoming and designed with young children in mind. And it's a great place, especially when you're first starting out, to get ideas and learn how to grow in your region. So maybe other people, and I'm not sure where the rest of us are from, but if you know of a community garden for little kids, that's a great one.
That's an awesome suggestion, and I will put a link to them when we post this. That's a really great. I should have included something about that. So thanks for mentioning that for sure. I think that's really hugely important. I know for me, I always dabbled in a little bit of gardening here and there. Ollie, I mentioned to you that we lived down in Silver City when my kid was younger, and he went to the Guadalupe Montessori school, and they have a most amazing school garden with chickens, and they've had goats back and forth from time to time. But there were a lot of parent workshops, and we were part of a chicken co-op down there. So we would take turns taking care of the chickens and cleaning the chicken coop, and that we were rewarded by getting the eggs. And then there would be a harvest like every 2 years where new chickens would come in and the old chickens would go out, and we'd have a day of making like chicken sausage together. And it really sort of helped me hone some skills. This, full disclosure, I should have said this from the start, I'm a very amateur gardener. You come out in the forest with me or send your little kids out in the forest with me, and you'll see that that's where my magic lies. Bree is an amazing gardener. Dee is, it's all on this spectrum of nature and place-based, and all very complementary as it, sits side by side. Does anybody, Misty, I know you're kind of a new gardener. Do you have any questions? Because there are some pretty amazing people here to ask some questions to.
Since I transplanted my tomatoes, can we get real technical just about the garden?
Yes, please, please do.
They look fine, but they don't look like they're growing anymore. Like they were shooting up, and now that they're out there, are they still settling into their space, or what's going on? Bree.
If somebody else wants to
Oh,
chime
yeah.
in, I always say,
So go ahead, Bree, go first.
so if you stick your finger in the soil, make sure it's wet all the way down through,
Okay.
and like really stick your finger like down into it. And
Okay.
really, and then tomatoes are heavy feeders. So you want to make sure that you're fertilizing them as
Okay.
the fertilizer says. And
Okay.
they will suffer when the heat picks up, when it gets above 90 degrees. But for now, they should be growing pretty steadily. And also, are they in sun more than 6 hours a day?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you got a sunny yard.
Yeah.
So start
Okay,
with water,
well-
then check fertilizer.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions, Misty? Because I really would love to know what your pick these brains between
I
Dee,
know.
Bree, and Ollie. Dee, Bree, and
Yeah.
Ollie.
I know. A lot of my seeds didn't come up, so I'm just trying to focus on the sprouts that are up, and maybe can I plant over stuff that didn't sprout after several weeks?
I would say yes, but then I would also say be cautious, because this happened to me last summer. I had sowed a lot of like lettuce and kale, and they did not come up. Like we were watering, and then suddenly about 3 months after sowing them into the ground, we had lettuce and kale coming up.
Okay.
But I've also discovered that particular side of the garden, it gets so much sun, like it's 12 plus hours a day. So those particular seeds, they would grow better if there was like partial lighting.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I would just add is like, don't be afraid to just grow whatever. A lot of like gardening that I've learned is just by trial and error.
Okay.
So I've learned with, at least here in southern Arizona where I live, that particular side of the garden grows potatoes really, really well. I'm about to test out carrots. I don't know, but this is just something, I just test things out to see what happens. And what I'll do is I'll put potatoes in this particular side of like the super sunny side of the garden side, and then I'll try it on the other side where there's partial sunlight to see what's the difference, or I'll try to grow it in a pot. But don't be discouraged. Just sometimes you have to test things out,
Thanks.
No problem.
What about Miranda? I don't know you, Miranda, or did she just disappear? I was going to see if she had any questions. I think she's gone because we are over time. Bummer. Well, Misty, do you have one more question, or does anybody have like one amazing sort of closing tip as we get ready to rock and roll? And I just want to send wheelbarrows full of gratitude to, you probably can't see it, but these are all the families that contributed to the pictures today. And Misty, you know who those two are.
Oh yeah.
This is Misty's backyard and their little garden that's got started here. Any closing tips or ideas? Or Ollie, we sort of started with you. Do you want to share anything before we sign off today?
I'm kind of surrounded by a ton of noise right now, so I don't know if I'm a great candidate. But I will say that I love the like-minded community feel that gardening has given us. I think that it kind of across the board. I mean, the boys were born in a very funny part of Phoenix called Paradise Valley. So it's a lot of wealthy families that don't necessarily do the outdoor thing, but just kind of having our influence among those group of friends. I have friends that are starting gardens for the first time. And so I think gardening is accessible to so many different types of people that you wouldn't necessarily think would be interested in it. So my main tip for anything, I guess, is don't underestimate yourself. Do not underestimate your kids, and don't underestimate your friends. Even if your friends don't seem like they like they would be interested in it, you never know. And I think it's a great way for people to get kind of reconnected back into the cycle of where food comes from.
Right. That's awesome. Well, that's a great place to stop. This is going to be available online, or I am going to check in Dee with Sarah because of that kerfuffle in the beginning, and I'll touch base with you because maybe we'll try to re-record it. Maybe we'll see. But thanks everybody for joining, and keep watching our Nature Niños page, and join us for the next module that's going to be all about play, supporting play in young children. All right, so I'm gonna say bye for now, and thank you all for being here. Hi, Benny. And we'll talk soon. Enjoy the
Thank you
Nature
so much.
Niños. Bye bye.
Bye.